our first female president, I'm sure in some alternate universe, Clinton, she is intending to release a novel entitled What Happened. It's supposed to be a memoir of this past presidential election through her perspective. And various excerpts of the novel have been distributed or otherwise leaked publicly. They've included various noteworthy phrases, if you will, one of which being that she felt disturbed to be on the same stage as Trump during one of the debates, and or all of them potentially. She blamed Sanders for the crooked Hillary comment that Trump put in place, as if Sanders had the puppet strings was making Trump say that. How you doing, Uncle Dash? Um, there's another. Oh, and my favorite one. She charges former Vice President Biden with having originated this claim that she didn't appeal to working class, even though during her campaign, as she alleges, he went out and spoke about many working class issues. So I've stated multiple times on this channel and just throughout my social media presence, I was not a fan of her. I was not a fan of Trump. I didn't vote for either of them. But nonetheless, I always find it really interesting when a defeated candidate writes some kind of recollection of what occurred. There's a certain historic value to it that I think will make this novel more endearing than the person who wrote it. And that's not to say that she's so unlikable that if you just look at a book with her face, don't you want to vomit. But I'm conveying her very low approval rating during that election cycle, and why I think it won't affect the purchases or numbers of sales that this likely will receive once it hits retail distribution. And when they do those little excerpt things in the media where they start saying, "Oh well, in new book Clinton alleges da 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 da," that's all done for the sake of promoting it, and it gets on my nerves a little bit because, Trump always talks about fake news, and I'm not a fan of his either. But I don't remember, I don't know, Ivanka's book being promoted and having excerpts leaked and distributed. Um, and the worst part about any one of these memoirs, though, is there's this thing they have called it's a whitewash effect, and it's a phenomenon where even if you don't try to keep out details that are otherwise not so good looking, I'm not talking about anything of, oh, Clinton, I don't know, yeah, because people from both sides like to know what she wrote. Yeah, that's what I'm conveying. But the whitewash thing is where, let's say during some meeting of her campaign, she cursed out, I don't know, a staffer. That's not going to be in there. It will probably be in a book in 5 or 10 years about her in this election cycle or her campaign, because someone else who has nothing to lose from having that knowledge known will speak about it. It reminds me of former Vice President Agnew, the first Vice President under Nixon, who, after leaving the White House in the most shameful ways known to man, with his resignation in the face of criminal charges, wrote a memoir called Come Quietly or Else, which alleged that Nixon and I believe Secretary of State Kissinger planned to have him assassinated. It's another charge that you don't necessarily think of as anything more than salacious at the time, and others now will look back and say, "Oh, maybe Nixon could have proposed that." But then you have to think to yourself, he and Nixon were on shaky ground, so he's not going to care about how one perceives Nixon. The same thing with Clinton and Trump. Clinton has nothing to lose by talking negatively about the current American president. She can say whatever she wants about him and really feel no type of repercussion in terms of, oh man, I might want him to do this for my foundation, or I might want to come back to the White House, because we've seen multiple times over the past where former presidents and their spouses will come back for one or two events during the new presidency, that kind of stuff. So she knows this is pretty much the end of her time around Washington, and she's probably never going to encounter him again in any context that is beyond a funeral or some memorial service. So you have to take that into account. And also, the more ridiculous stuff you put in the novel, unfortunately, the more it sells, especially when it's something that people can't prove. So even if she didn't, if she did rather feel that Trump was disturbing to her during the debate, we can't prove that's how she felt. Even if Sanders, again, I don't know how he could have made Trump call her crooked Hillary, unless Trump is his puppet and Sanders has the little string things to make him speak and say words, or he's a ventriloquist and he has him sitting in his lap and he has his mouth closed like this and has Trump speaking the words that he's telling him to, instructing him to do. So that's another claim that couldn't theoretically be proven, but it's something that sounds salacious, so it will sell and get distributed. But what bothers me the most about this whole thing is that during the campaign, I was bothered by an insistence that how could you be, and TYT did this to an extent too, where they also spoke about having these claims made against them. You're sexist. You don't want the first woman to be president. You don't want the first woman to be president. And my whole thing has always been I don't care what the gender or race or any or religion of a candidate is. If you wanted a woman so badly, you could have put for the Democrats, Warren, or for the Republicans, Haley. I pretty much would have picked any other currently in office female politician over her. And one can say, "Oh, you're saying that in retrospect," but this feels to me to be an attempt to kind of get a cash grab on that whole first woman nominated by a major party, because that's exactly what's going to be in the I guarantee the tagline for this. Read the memoir of the first woman to ever become the nominee for a major political party ever. Just as if one goes back in 100 years and looks at the Obama presidency and say, everything fails at that point. They're going to say, you got to read on the first, African American to achieve that office. You got to read on him. He's historic because he's this, or he happened to have been this prior to being this or that. Um, and I am bothered by identity politics, and I feel that so many on the left do that, not necessarily just with how they go about trying to shove you in these groups where if you're a minority you can't support Trump, or if you're a working class Caucasian male then suddenly you're going to be more in favor of automatically Trump or some other person that's not a woman or a Democratic nominee. It's all I don't favor any of that, and it gets on my nerves that it reaches out in so many different ways. But we'll see how this book does. I think it'll be successful. I think it's probably going to be worth the read for the historic value. So I'm interested in it.